This week on the show, there are some strange things going on at eBay, Etsy, and Mercari, and I will attempt to answer some of your reselling questions. What is up, Galaxians? Welcome to episode number 243 of the Galaxy CDs, Rocks, and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I will be your host as we wade through a pretty massive episode this week. I have got a ton of reselling news and quite a few questions that you have submitted either through Instagram, email, or on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who reached out with a question for the show today. We're going to cover a lot of that starting in just a moment, but I did want to talk about something that happened last week that if you weren't aware of, I did have the opportunity to sit down and spend some time with my friend Katie Reads on her show. That video is up on her channel. If you'd like to go check that out, I will leave a link to that show in the show notes and the video description down below. We had a very good, wide-ranging discussion that lasted almost 90 minutes. So if you can't get enough of me, you can go check that out too. And if you're not a subscriber already to Katie's wonderful channel, you should definitely consider doing that as well. With that bit of housekeeping out of the way, let's get into some of these questions that you sent in. So I'll start by saying I did get some pretty specific eBay process questions, and I'm not going to answer those in this episode. I'm actually going to do some separate videos on those particular topics. So there was a question about how to set up eBay coupons. There was another one about combined shipping. Someone asked about buyer groups on eBay. So I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks just some separate short, 8-10 minute videos on how to do those things. So if you're not a subscriber to the channel, this is a perfect opportunity to do that. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when those episodes go live. But I am going to cover those separately in later shows. So this first question comes from my friend, the Media Picker. What are your thoughts on the per-click advertising that eBay now offers on listings? This is similar to what Etsy does. Do you ever see yourself doing this based on your business model? I would think this would only be effective in high demand areas such as collectibles and sports cards as an example. Thank you for the question. I tend to agree with that. I don't think in my particular business model that makes sense. When I look at the number of clicks that I already get that don't turn into purchases, and I look at the number of the amount of money that I would make on an item, I would think I would spend a fortune in pay per click that would not result in sales on particular items. So for my business, would not do that. I get it for, like what you said, high demand, really kind of high volume items where you've got a bunch of them and you want people looking at that item pretty regularly. That model may make very good sense. A lot of people are very successful across a range of platforms with pay-per-click advertising. For my business model, it just doesn't work. I'm not sure for most media sellers that probably would be a great option. Again, as I talk about on this channel all the time, your mileage may vary and you can run your business however you see fit. But for my own part, that is not probably something that I would consider doing. I do the standard promoted listings where I only pay a fee if an item gets purchased on eBay. I'm currently running at 7%. I've been doing that basically since last summer when I set that up, and I do have a whole video on that process as well. I started at 5%. Last year when kind of summer slowdown started to kick in, I did up it to 7%, and I've just left it there. Probably on any given day, 50 to 60% of my sales come from those promoted listings, so I am paying a premium ultimately for some of those sales. But that model works better for me because I'm only paying the fee, even though it's higher, when an item actually sells. So take that for what it's worth. But thank you again, Brandon, for the question. This one was I believe on YouTube. Hey, Ryan, I have a question for you. Do you go to library sales? We have a large one coming up, and I've never been to one. What genres should I focus on? Any tips you care to share will be very appreciated. Thanks, as always, for the videos. Kathleen, thank you so much for the kind words. I love library sales mostly. I think I talked about one last fall where I went and everything was like way, way, way overpriced. that is the exception, not the norm. Generally speaking, at these sales, the books are a buck or two, and there are, generally speaking, thousands to choose from. It's a really great opportunity to score some excellent inventory. I rarely walk away from a library sale with less than 5 or 6 Rubbermaid totes full of books, hundreds of books at a time. I generally do not pass up library sales. There is one coming up actually next weekend in my area that I am going to pass up, simply because I just did that 1,000 book buy a couple of weeks ago, which I'm picking the last of those books up on Monday. Probably by the time you hear this, I will be on my way to get the last of those. And over the weekend, I was going to get my Saturday morning donuts, and I drove by an intersection, and there was a sign from one of my favorite estate sellers, and I always try to stop in and see them. So I said, I'll just stop by and say hi and see what's going on over there when I do my shipments this morning. And I stopped in, and of course, the house was full of books, which was a good thing. But I ended up buying another 167 books at that sale for $150, so about 90 cents a piece. Really good deal on some really great vintage books. So I'm just at a point right now where this library sale at the end of the week is just not going to work out for me. I don't even have any tubs right now that I could take. So I'm going to pass on that one. But yeah, generally speaking, I love the library sales. I look for, again, my specialty is kind of vintage and antique books, so that's generally where I will go first. It's also an area where I find generally there's not nearly as much competition, so that's an area I key on. I will look for old textbooks, old science and engineering books. Then I will hit the religious section. Religion is a very, very strong category for me, at least. And then I will probably do like science fiction and those, because there's usually some pretty good finds in there. And then I will just walk the rest of the sale looking for things that are unusual, things that just kind of catch my eye, or things that I know I have sold in the past. I did go to a library sale once where I found like an entire collection, was 100 and some odd books from one particular series, action paperbacks. They were 50 cents a piece. They were selling pretty regularly on eBay for $5 to $10 each plus shipping. So that looked like a good buy. So I just scooped all of those up. So those are the kinds of things that I would probably be on the lookout for. If you want to do the vintage and antique, religious, old textbooks I talk about on this show all the time, those do really well for me. So those would probably be the areas I would key on. A lot of those sales will have a lot of kind of contemporary fiction and newer books. And if you're a Amazon FBA seller and you're scanning those, you can probably find some gems there as well. That's not my business model, so I generally overlook all that kind of stuff. I understand I'm probably leaving money on the table doing that, but that's just not an area that I want to focus on. I don't sell on Amazon, so it just doesn't work for me. So those are ones that I generally will just kind of walk by, romance and contemporary fiction and that kind of stuff. But that's kind of how I would approach library sales. I had somebody ask me about library sales a couple of months ago, and I suggested that they go, and I did get a message back that they went and did very, very well. So Kathleen, let me know if you hear this, if you went to the sale and how you did. This one was on Instagram from Den Decor Depot. I've got a question for you for a future episode. How do you determine what products go to which platforms? With my business, Etsy seems a bit more bougie. I would agree with that, probably. eBay is the world's marketplace, and Mercari seems to be like a flea market. I would say that assessment is pretty much spot on. My experience has been that eBay is the bulk of my business. The kind of more expensive and more unusual vintage and antique items do really, really well for me over on Etsy. And then Mercari seems to be kind of the lower end of the price spectrum. A lot of $10 and $12 books over there. It's a pretty rare occasion where I sell a fairly expensive book over on Mercari. So that kind of breakdown of those tiers for me is probably about right. Maybe off, but I'd love to sort of hear your mindset as to searching comps on the other platforms is nearly impossible. I don't even attempt to do that. So my rationale is I comp pretty much exclusively on eBay. I will occasionally look also at Amazon and Abe Books just to get kind of a frame of reference, but I do not comp on Mercari or on Etsy. Their pricing, if you list on Mercari at all, you know their like suggested pricing that comes up as you're doing the listing process, 95% of the time is nowhere near what I have already decided the price should be on that item. And I don't know if that's based on their historical data for that item or it's just throwing a dart, but I find it to be next to useless. The number of items that you can actually comp on those sites is also not generally, again, for my business, at least in books, is not real great. There's not a lot of the same kind of thing out there. So I comp eBay for everything. And then again, if it's something really unusual, or like, for instance, the other day I had a book that I comped on eBay and there was one seller with one copy and he was at $99. So I went over to Abe Books just to look, and there were probably 10 or 12 of that same book starting at about $15. So what do you do in that case? I comped and priced my item kind of in between those two. I did like $24.99 with an acceptable best offer of $20. So I'm on eBay, I look like I'm a terrific deal, but somebody who might be searching on Google for that particular item might see some of these Abe Books things at $15 and $20, and mine will still be competitive with them. So in a case like that, I do tend to look at a little bit broader market within my niche. That only makes sense, obviously, if it's books, but you could do the same thing on other sites that specialize in whatever it may be, auto parts or electronics. You could look at Reverb, you could look at whatever. So I will kind of broaden my horizons, but most of the time I just use eBay, and that price is then what I transfer over to either Etsy or to Mercari, and I don't worry about what my competitive situation looks like on those sites. And we'll get into that a little bit further in the show because there's another question about cross-listing. Jojo from NC commented, do you keep non-selling books forever or do you eventually get rid of items? I know books are long tail, but how long tail is too long? Thanks. Thank you for the question. If you ask 10 people, you'll probably get 10 different answers on what the timing of this would be. In my case, I actually do not discard old inventory. Now, when I'm doing my research, when I do a bulk buy and I'm sorting through the items, if I find these things that are $4 free shipping, they're not worth my time. I've got so much inventory, I'm generally speaking not really even trying to bundle a lot of that stuff. I will just put them in the donate pile and I will take them to some of the little libraries that are around the area, or there's a religious-based thrift shop in the area, and I'll take them over there to support them. So I will find a home for those books, but I don't spend a lot of time sourcing them, or rather trying to list them and figure out what to do with them. If, however, I've decided that I do want to sell a book, it's $8, $10, free shipping, whatever the case may be, and I decide to list it. If I've decided to list it, I think it's a good listing, I'm just going to leave it up essentially forever. I am blessed. I'm in a position where I've got a nice big warehouse space that is super, super cheap. So I can afford to keep all this long tail inventory around. It only takes one buyer for it to work out. So I will hold on to these things forever. I do, however, run sales every single month. Anything that's been in my eBay listings for over 365 days gets some kind of discount. The oldest stuff, maybe 50 or 60% off, and the newer stuff maybe only 10 or 15%. So I do try to incentivize some activity on those books, but I do not actually delist and get rid of them. The other reason I don't do that is a lot of them have come from bulk buys, and those buys have already long since paid for themselves. So I don't really have a significant amount of money tied up in those old books. And again, it only takes one buyer to come looking for that random item. I would say probably 10 times a week, I sell items that I've had in my inventory for 2+ years. So it's, for me, I have the space, I have the time, and I have the financial wherewithal to carry those things essentially forever. And that's what I do. I feel like, especially in media, that's super important because there are millions, literally, of titles that are available. And if I've got one and I've got a good listing and it's competitively priced, I stand a chance of selling it and making a little bit of money on it. And that's, at the end, that's what I'm here to do. So I keep them forever. Again, your mileage may vary and you'll probably hear different things from different sellers. I know people tend to want to move through their inventory. In my case, from a financial standpoint, it just doesn't make sense to get rid of them. I hold on to them. essentially forever. Eventually, I'm going to be too old to do this, and I'll have to figure something out. But right now, I don't get rid of them. And again, thank you so much for the question. This one, I believe, came through my link tree from Phil. Question for an upcoming podcast. One, what do you do with positive, negative feedback? Someone leaves you a positive feedback, but in the comments, they say something negative. I've had this happen twice in the last month, but never before now. Just curious if I should do anything with it. The feedback category is positive, but the comment itself is negative or neutral. I will usually, when I see those, I will put a comment on it that if they bring up a particular issue, I will try to address the issue and say, I'm not sure why I've got positive feedback, but this comment, and I will send them a message actually to the buyer to try to sort out what the situation was. So kind of a two-step approach. I'll message them and say, hey, I saw you left positive feedback, but you mentioned XYZ. Was there an issue I need to be aware of? And then I will reiterate that as my reply to that feedback, saying that I've reached out to the customer. I'm not sure what this situation is. And then I will just leave it alone. If I hear back from the customer, I'll try to sort their problem. If I don't, I move on with life. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about those kind of things. But if I do see them, I will do those two steps to kind of try to address it. Second question, what does an average day of sourcing look like for you? It depends. Like I just said, randomly on a Saturday going to get donuts, I found an estate sale that I had no intention of going to, and I spent 3 hours in this house researching and picking up 167 books. So that can be a day. The 1,000 book lot that I did was essentially a private pick where I essentially pulled all of them, but I was contacted by an estate seller to make connection with a law firm to buy an entire estate's worth of books. So that is just a matter of going up and packing them all up and hauling them away. Normally, if I'm just going out for the day, I will get on like estatesales.net. I will look at the garage sale finder sites and see kind of what's going on in a particular area. Make my little Google Maps plan and decide where I'm going to go and when I'm going to hit them. And I'll just go out and start hitting the sales. I will spend 6 or 8 hours out at the sales until they're done, or I'm either out of money or out of space in the SUV, looking for scores. And I'll go through some estate sales. There's nothing there, and I'm pretty quick in and out. Other ones, as you know, you'll find, like the one I just did on Saturday, a whole bunch of stuff, and you'll spend a lot of time there. So that's kind of, there is no average day, but if I'm just going out sourcing, I will try to plot 6, 8, 10 sales to hit, knowing that some of them are going to be busts and I'm only going to be there a few minutes, and others I may spend an hour or two at sourcing. I will also then, because I'm buying in some kind of quantities, of course, try to negotiate a better price. If they've got a mark $2 a piece, I may try to get them down a little bit on that. Hey, I got 50 books here. Can you do $1 or $1.50 or whatever? Trying to keep my costs down, because again, that's where you make your money. Last thing, do you ever try to and source only high-value books? I do try to target that. So when I go to a sale, I'm typically looking for the better buys, books that are, in my case, $15 or more, kind of retail value, what I think I can sell for $15 to $20 and up. And those are the ones that I'll really focus on targeting, unless I find like a big collection. Like I walked into a sale once and saw 200 odd science fiction paperbacks. I have a pretty good knowledge of that area, and I know within that collection there's going to be 10 or 20 that are probably pretty decent value, and most of the rest of them are going to be $4 or $5, and I can usually get a lot like that for 25 or 50 cents a piece. So I will just take all of those. But typically I'm trying to source the better items while simultaneously kind of looking at the collection in total to decide if I want to try to make an offer on all of the items that remain at the end of a sale. I haven't actually done that in a while, mostly because I just haven't found a sale where the collection was good enough that I would be interested in it. But that's kind of my approach. I'll cherry pick out what I think are the best titles, and then as I'm doing that, make some kind of determination. Do I want to offer on all of this stuff at the end and just come haul it away? Or is this one I'm going to take my wins and get on with life? So thank you for the question. This, I think, is also from Phil. Another question that I have, you could answer if you feel up to it, is on cross-listing and cross-posting. Software like Vendoo and List Perfectly get a lot of mixed reviews. They do. I use List Perfectly. I've talked about it here before. 95% of the time, it works flawlessly. Every now and then, like any software program, if you've ever played a video game or any of that, you know they can have glitches. So it should not come as a big surprise. My big concerns are with delisting items and with cost and how to know when it's a good time to get it. I realize a good portion of that cost analysis has to do with the amount of items you're selling, but it seems like a big price for an unknown amount of profit or not profit. I currently sell only on eBay and a very small handful of things on Facebook Marketplace. I'm not sure if jumping through the hoops to get on Mercari and Etsy are really worth it. I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on expanding to more platforms and cross-listing platforms. I can't speak to Vendu. I know there are people who use it that speak very highly of it. I've not messed with it. I've never looked at it, so I can't really say with any fairness. If any of you do use it, feel free to leave a comment in the video description down below. Let him know kind of what you think of it, but I've not used it. List Perfectly, I barely scratched the surface of what it can do. You mentioned in this question the delisting portion. I know they recently introduced automatic delisting. If you use the program the way it's designed, it should be able to do that for you, which would eliminate that problem. I do not. I manually delist. When I get an order and I get a notification on my phone, I take the 30 seconds to go into Mercari and delete it, or go into Etsy and delete it, or at least deactivate it until the purchase is paid for, and then move on. If I was selling hundreds of listings a day, that would not work, but most days it's under 20, so it's not a big deal to take that minute or two and manually delist. So that's what I'm doing. I do sell on Mercari and on Etsy. For me, it made good sense to do because I have a big volume of products and products that fit both of those categories. I list everything to Mercari because it's free to list and, at least for the moment, free to sell. They've moved the selling fees, as we talked about, over to the buyer. We'll have a comment on that here in a minute as well. But since it's free to list, I automatically transfer everything over there. Etsy, I'm a lot more specific. I will only put items on Etsy that are $12.99 and higher because of the every 4 month 20-cent listing fee. It doesn't make a lot of sense for me to have a $4 book over there that maybe takes 2 years to sell on that platform, and I've paid $2 or $3 in relisting fees, so I don't do that over there. They're all $12.99 or more. Between the two, I do about 20% of my business every month. Probably 5% on Mercari and 15% on Etsy. The rest of it, 80%, is eBay. I'm on the business plan with List Perfectly. It's $49 a month. I have usually recouped that expense by the second or third day of the month in my case. For me, with the number of listings that I have, it makes sense and it is highly profitable. I'd have to go in and pull the numbers, but those two platforms combined last year were probably in the neighborhood of $18,000 to $20,000 in gross sales against the less than $600 I spent in fees for List Perfectly. So at my margins, that is a huge win. Again, your mileage will vary on that. I think most people would say that cross-listing and getting your products in front of more eyeballs, like I talked about earlier, those are three distinct markets. Mercari is kind of the lower end flea market. People looking for a deal. eBay is kind of the cornerstone of the e-commerce market in secondhand goods. And then Etsy is a little higher end, a little more discerning buyer looking for a little more specific vintage or antique items. So if you have that kind of mix of products, I think listing on those other sites probably makes good sense. Shameless plug, there is an affiliate link in the show notes and the video description down below where you can get 30% off your first month of List Perfectly. So if you want to give it a try and see how it works for you, see how you like it, it does have a bit of a learning curve. So that gives you some time to mess around with it and see if it makes sense for your business and what kind of results you get. I was instantly making sales on these other platforms. And again, it's not necessarily on any given day huge money, but over the course of a year, it was $18,000 or $20,000 in gross sales, which is nothing to sneeze at. Chuck Witt, hi Ryan, your thoughts on this hypothetical question. With the upcoming election and the possible turmoil, what if the eBay items that we sell, which are more pleasure-based and non-essential, during those uncertain times, people tighten their wallets for essential items only? Do you have a backup plan what to do for income, as it could be months? Trying not to be a glass half empty person here. I feel like at election time, sales business just tends to get a little tight anyway as people go through a period of uncertainty with who's going to win, how's it going to go. This election, not to get into too much politics here, is probably fraught with more peril than some elections in the past have been. There's a lot more division between and among the sides, so this one could be a little more sketchy. I agree that if your business model is primarily kind of non-essential and whatever you want to call it, disposable income type items, that you may suffer a little bit. The flip side of that is, as the economy gets tight, as inflation continues to be an issue, people are also looking for deals, and they still want to do things and have fun and read books, play video games, do puzzles, do whatever. So there is still a market for the type of goods that we're selling. So to be fair, I don't have a backup plan. I think my business is established enough at this point. I'm not sure I would want to try to open as a new reseller heading directly into the election with a lot of uncertainty and not a plan B, or to just jump in full time and do this. But for my own part, I think I'm well enough established that I'm not overly concerned about this. I do expect that there will be a dip as we get closer to election time, but I don't think it's going to be significant enough that I'm in like panic mode about it. Things you can do: you can run more sales, you can run more promotions, you can list more items, you can try to find higher ticket items or better profit margin items. So you build your business and your store in a little bit different way to try to prepare for that. Maybe focus on expanding your horizons into some replenishables or some essential items that you think people might be looking for. So there are some things you can do to hopefully try to help mitigate this. Again, I'm the glass half full guy. I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem for a lot of sellers, but it may be for some, and it certainly is worth taking a look at things you can do to maybe make your business a little more resilient in that case. Last question. Can you discuss some of the metrics you track and what insights they give you to see how you are doing? I keep track of a lot of stuff. Over the course of a week, I'm constantly looking at my seller performance on eBay to make sure that I'm going to keep my top rated seller status, which has never been a problem, but it is something that I look at. I look at my return rate to see how I'm doing with returns. Am I doing something wrong that's causing me to get an excessive amount of returns? As I talked about, I think a couple of weeks ago, I currently don't have any issues with returns. I checked this morning. My return percentage is now at 0 for the last 3 months. I've not taken a single return. But the ones I really keep an eye on, and I post this over on my Instagram at Galaxy CDs Rocks every Saturday, are my listings created and my listings sold. And the reason that I do that is because those to me have, number one, a correlation. As I list more items, I sell more items, and those two right now are pretty much in sync. At my inventory level, which is 10,500, 10,600 listings, if I list 100 items, I'm likely to sell close to 100 items every week. And that to me, for my business, is a comfortable level of performance, and I'm trying to maintain that. There are weeks it's up or down. I may list more, I may sell more, but that's kind of the number I'm shooting for. Something in that, say, 90 to 120 range of listings, which will then, in theory, correlate into a similar number of sales. Those things are not necessarily linear. If I spent more time and did an extra 50 or 60 listings a week, I would not expect that my sales would instantly increase by that number, because the 100 listings I'm selling now are not all the new ones. Like I just mentioned, I'm selling maybe 10 items a week that I've had for 2 years or more, but over time, those numbers have kind of balanced out for me. So the other thing that for me that makes sense is it shows what my behavior is, what my activity level is. I'm grinding out whatever it is, 100 listings a week, and that's something that I have actual control over. I don't have any way to control if a buyer is going to come and buy the $400 book or the $4 book. All I can do is control the things I can control, and creating good, high quality listings and the number of them that I've decided makes sense for my business is measurable and it's actionable. I did an episode months and months and months ago about goal setting and why it's important. And that's one of those things. And that's why I track that one so diligently. I have my planning calendar next to me. I keep track of how many listings I'm planning to do for a week, how many I do each day to keep myself on track for that goal. And those things have allowed my business to grow at a nice, steady pace. The other things that I will look at are I update my accounting on a daily basis so I can look at any given moment and I know what my gross profit margin is. That's important to me because that tells me if I'm doing good buys, and those buys are not only generating sales, but they're generating profitable sales. If my margins start to fall, I know I'm doing something wrong, and then I can dig a little deeper into, am I paying too much for items? Am I buying too low a value items? Where am I falling down? Why is that number coming down? The other one I'll look at, of course, is my net profit, because that's the double bottom line. That's my paycheck, my pre-tax income. Where is that number? What are the things that are affecting that? And try to monitor, am I spending too much on supplies? Is my rent too high? What's going on? Why is my net margin fluctuating? So those are things that for me are really, really key metrics. I know a lot of sellers look at things like average selling price. They look at their 90-day totals. There's a whole list of reports that are available in eBay in particular, where you can go down to item levels and see what's your performance. How are you doing in books and magazines? How are you doing in CDs? Those are things that I will check probably once a quarter. I don't check them monthly because I'm not necessarily all that concerned about how my number compares to others in the field. I'm more concerned about, am I hitting the targets I've set for my own business? But I will look at those things just to see where I stack up. Again, there's a ton of available reports and available numbers. I will say, and I've said this before, that comparison is the thief of joy. Be very cautious when you look at other sellers' information. When you look at somebody posts their average selling price, those numbers in isolation are not necessarily reflective of how successful someone's business is. And I'll just run through just a really quick kind of math experiment. So let's say you have two booksellers, and one of them posts on Instagram that they have an average selling price of $20, and the other person has an average selling price of just 15, and that's all they tell you. Your natural inclination would be to say that the person who has the average selling price of $20 is doing better. They're more successful. That is not necessarily the case, however, because you don't really have enough information to make a good judgment. If you peel back another layer of the onion, and let's say the person that has an average selling price of $20 is selling 100 books a month. So they're making $2,000 worth of sales. The person who has an average selling price of 15 is selling 200 books a month, and they're making $3,000. Now, you would look at those two situations and say the person that, despite having a lower average selling price, is actually doing better because they made more gross sales. And again, I would say to you, you really don't have enough information yet to make that determination. Let's say, for example, that the person with the $20 average selling price that sold 100 books only does donations and free book pickups. They don't pay for any inventory. And that the other person buys all of their books and pays an average of $5 a piece for them. Now that person has a cost of goods sold of $1,000, and they both are walking away at the end of that month with $2,000. So you can see just from that little example how every time you learn a little bit more information about someone's business, you can make a little better determination of how their business is actually doing. And when we look at these posts of big average selling prices, big 60-day or 90-day numbers on eBay, that kind of stuff in isolation, they are at best misleading and sometimes just completely out of the realm of realism in terms of what it might mean for your business. So, as I talk about here a lot, focus on your own business, know what your goals are, what you want to achieve, and measure yourself against those metrics, not necessarily what you see someone on Instagram doing. That's my rant for the day. Thank you again to everyone who reached out with a question. If you found any of this useful or helpful, please do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. And I will, again, have those videos coming out over the next couple of weeks for some eBay-specific process functions. With that, gosh, we're already at 35 minutes, and I have got a massive news recap here. So let's get stuck in to some reselling news.
News updates.
So I mentioned in the intro, there are some strange things going on in the world of reselling. It seems like all of the platforms, eBay, Etsy, and Mercari, have all had like some random stuff happening over the last week. This article, actually, I think all of today's articles are from E-commerce Bytes. eBay is canceling orders today for no apparent reason. This article was published on Saturday, April 20th. Sellers are getting notices today that eBay canceled orders due to what it vaguely called a quote-unquote systems issue. In a tweet, they called it a technical issue and a technical hiccup. Those who received the message are confused and upset not only because eBay canceled the orders, but because of the lack of information about the reason and whether eBay used its own funds to issue the refunds or whether it was coming out of the seller's pockets. My guess would be that it's coming out of the seller's pocket because the transaction did not get completed. If this happened to you, you can let me know in the comments down below and on the YouTube channel if this happened and what you saw in your payment accounts. But I would have to assume that eBay was using your funds to fund the refund because that's where the money was originally coming from. In one thread on the eBay discussion boards, the seller said they'd gotten the message about eBay refunding the buyer and wondered, the item has already been mailed, so I guess I'm out the money and the item. That is definitely a problem. I don't know. I guess I don't understand how... Well, it's a technical glitch, so I guess all bets are off. But an item that's already been marked shipped, you would think would be very difficult for the system to cancel. If I was in this person's shoes, I would definitely reach out to eBay customer support to see how that's going to be handled. Various sellers posted the identical message from eBay, which stated, eBay recently identified a systems issue that impacted your order. As a result, we've had to cancel your order and issue a refund to the buyer. Please check your canceled orders for more details. We apologize for any inconvenience this issue may have caused, and we have refunded your fees. So they are at least refunding your fees. Seems fair, right? We hope you choose to relist your item. We'd like to assure you that your seller performance rating won't be impacted by defects resulting from this issue, and we will proactively remove neutral or negative feedback. We'll see how that works. That seems like a big ask when they're already having technical issues, but they say if you've already shipped your item or you have any questions, please get in touch. We're here to help. Thank you for being part of the eBay seller community. While the eBay message said it would refund sellers' fees, it didn't specify if that included promoted listing advertising fees. I can't say with any certainty, but I know when I do a cancellation or any type of a refund or an adjustment, if there are standard promoted fees associated with that transaction, those do get refunded. Obviously, if you're on the pay-per-click model, you're paying for the clicks, not for the sale of the item. So those fees would be different and would not be coming back to you. But I would assume that that would be the case here. One seller, a former eBay employee, said the cancellation had been a terrible experience for his buyer who was confused as he was. I had already confirmed the address as requested, and he said he called it a farce. He also expressed concern over the safety of users' private data. Some sellers said they didn't receive a notification from eBay, but instead they received questions from buyers asking why their orders had been canceled. I have not had either of these issues happen to me. I did not get any kind of notification from eBay on this. I have not had any orders canceled by eBay, so I don't know how widespread this is. Again, if you're watching on YouTube and this happened to you, let us know down in the comments below what your experience was with it, but this was not something that affected me. Another seller said, I had 2 auction items that were sold and paid for yesterday, canceled the day, the reason being other. I did not receive any email from eBay that the orders were canceled, which I always receive if I cancel an order because of non-payment or a buyer request. I only found out because the buyer sent a message asking why the order was canceled. That again leads me to believe that eBay does not completely have their arms around this issue because the system is not generating individual emails on all orders. It's again, it's technology, it's glitchy, it's whatever, but when it affects your pocketbook and your bottom line and your ability to conduct transactions on the platform, it's obviously very troublesome. Never had something like this happen before they went on. The buyers were refunded and the money removed from my account. So there's your first clue that that's how they're doing that. So it is good that I hadn't shipped the orders yet. I can make new listings for the buyers and they can purchase again, but I would like to know what is happening. This then ties into another issue that we're going to get into here in a minute about some shipping issues. The timing of the decision by eBay to cancel orders has some sellers wondering if it was connected with a glitch that they acknowledged on Thursday, which it had provided sellers with incorrect ship to addresses on some orders going back as far as April 7th. Here we go. eBay told sellers to ship to wrong addresses for nearly 2 weeks. Wow. eBay notified sellers that it had provided them with wrong addresses to send their orders. Incredibly, this article says it had done so for nearly 2 weeks, going back to April 7th, and it was unable to tell sellers which orders they had sent or had yet to send that had bad addresses. That is remarkable. Again, I've not had any indication that this has happened to me. I have shipped in this time frame a couple of hundred orders. I've not had any issues. I've not had customers reach out to me and say the item arrived at a wrong address. I've not had any communication from eBay that I've had any orders that were involved in this, but this is really, really bad. An eBay moderator acknowledged the problem on Thursday the 18th, which they reported in their blog. There is a link, and I'll link to all these articles, of course, in the show notes and the video description below. On Friday, eBay sent a message to some sellers, so apparently just sellers that they felt had been affected by this. On April 7th, an issue generated errors in the shipping addresses associated with some buyer orders. So again, this is not it may be widespread, but it's certainly not everybody, not every buyer, not every order, not every seller, which probably makes it hard to track down what's going wrong and get it fixed. But nonetheless, please confirm, they say, the buyer's shipping address by reaching out to the buyer on any orders placed after April 7th that have not yet been sent. Again, I'm doing 100 orders a week. That would be a massive undertaking for me. And it would also potentially impact my ability to hit my 1 business day processing, because if a customer does not respond to me within 1 day, I can't hit my metrics. So this causes all kinds of potential downstream problems if you have to do this process manually. I digress. If a mismatch, they said, is found, please cancel the order and relist the item. eBay will protect your performance for canceled orders, remove any resulting negative feedback, and refund associated fees. So again, just a messy, messy situation. Let me know if you were affected by this in the comments down below. For my part, as far as I'm aware, I have not seen this issue personally. A seller who received the message said they had contacted customers and found incorrect address information, which they then had to manually correct. There is no information, they said, from eBay about when we can trust their system again. And in fact, after a long conversation by phone with an eBay customer service agent, I discovered that they also had no idea yet, at least, about why this has happened, how long before it's fixed, and what may have happened to shipments between April 7th and the 18th. Sellers were quite concerned about how they would identify and fix orders sent to their buyers. There's essentially nothing you can do except to contact the buyer directly. And again, if an order's already been shipped, it's probably too late to even do anything about it because the thing is already on its way to a wrong address. Hopefully those items ultimately get returned to you, but it's going to be a messy, messy process if you had a bunch of orders that got caught up in this. What about items I've already shipped that are maybe headed to the wrong address? I didn't see anything in the message about eBay covering our losses in those cases. Sellers had lots of questions about the ramifications of this error, including how widespread it was, whether they should reach out to customers they already shipped items to, and whether, despite assurances in eBay's message, they might suffer negative consequences, which is always the question. If something does go sideways, how many hoops am I going to have to jump through with eBay to get it fixed? So it's let me know. There is a video in this link down below. Casey Paris, who's a well-known eBay seller and YouTuber, apparently got this message from eBay. So if you want to check out a little more detail on that, you can go look at his video as well. Do that after you finish listening to this show, though. What eBay should do to make the new shipping policy palatable. So if you're not aware of this is a fun one. Even as some marketplaces have begun to reduce selling fees or even shifted fees from sellers to buyers, a la Mercari, eBay is doing what is in effect the opposite. It sent an email to some sellers. This article just says sellers. This is another email message that I did not get on Wednesday, April 17th, informing them that it would be passing along shipping discounts it currently offers sellers to buyers instead. The new policy only impacts sellers who use calculated shipping, and eBay said sellers who use calculated shipping can opt out of the new policy, which goes into effect on May 15th. I have thoughts. Here's what the email said. We're reaching out to let you know that starting May 15th, your listings that display calculated shipping will default to showing eBay labels discounted shipping rates. The new default rate will apply to all of your active and future listings that offer calculated shipping. Listings with free or flat rate shipping will not be affected. We're making this change to help your listings attract more buyers by offering a lower shipping cost. To get the discounted rate that will be displayed on your listings, make sure to purchase your shipping labels through eBay Labels. If you want to opt out of this change, let us know here by May 13th, and we won't make any changes to your current shipping rates. You can also switch back to showing standard rates at any time after May 15th through your shipping discount settings. Please note that this change will only apply to sellers receiving this email. So I'm going to unpack this bit by bit here. So I'll start with that last thing. Again, I did not receive this message. Midwest Picker, someone I follow on Instagram, had received this message and posted it on his Instagram, and he and I had a little discussion in his comments about that. I did not receive it. I have no idea why. It may be because most of my listings are media mail rate, which does not have any commercial pricing or discounts associated with it. So I would not be affected mostly by this. I do have some listings that are ground advantage and whatever that potentially could be. But I did not receive this email, and this is pretty specific that it is only going to apply to sellers who received the message. Again, let me know in the comments, did you get this message? My biggest issue with this is that it is being done by eBay as an opt-out. It's always been available. You could always have passed this discount along to your buyers by opting in, by selecting that method of shipment when you set up your listings. This has always been something you could do. Changing it, the default, to opt in, to me, I just have a philosophical issue with that. These kind of things where you or I, as a business owner, have made a decision on how we want to price our shipping. There are many sellers who do not pass along this discount as a way to recoup some of the fees that eBay charges on shipping, because of course you're paying your final value fee, and if you're using promoted listings standard, you're paying your ad fee on the shipping charge. So if the shipping charge is $10, you're paying fees on that whole $10. If you can then buy the label for $8, you have a chance to claw back a little bit of that fee. So making this opt out to me is problematic because, again, the platform is making a decision for your business that you may not necessarily agree with. Now, you can say it's their sandbox. You've got to play by their rules, and I get it, and I give them credit. They are leaving us an opt out. But for me, this kind of thing should be opt in. Also, to be fair, a site like Etsy automatically has always, as far as I'm aware, at least in the time I've been selling there, shown that discounted rate to your buyers. So they're already doing it that way. The other thing that I have issue with is this little section where they talk about, we're making this change to help your listings attract more buyers by offering a lower shipping cost. I disagree with that. Now, it may entice some buyers on eBay globally to make a purchase that they would not have made ordinarily, but it doesn't affect you individually because everybody's prices are going to go down. If you used this program previously by having opted in, you theoretically were at a bit of a competitive advantage against people who were not passing that savings along because you had a lower shipping cost. But now, assuming that everybody goes along with this, which I don't think they're going to, I think most people will probably opt out of this But assuming that everybody went along with it, that competitive advantage for your individual listing has completely disappeared because everybody's prices did the same thing that yours did. They dropped by $2, $3, $4 on shipping. That, to me, is a disingenuous statement. This will help eBay potentially sell more items, but it is not going to make your individual listing any more competitive. I hate when they put this kind of stuff in that kind of language. So you can let me know what you think about that in the comments below. For my part, I don't currently offer that rate to buyers who use that service. For the very reasons I discussed, it allows me to recoup a little bit of the expense of shipping. With media mail shipping, for instance, there is no discount. So on every order I ship, I'm losing money. I'm losing the final value fee on the shipping plus the cost of my materials. Again, as I talked about in some other episodes, some of those are costs that should be borne by the seller. I have no issue paying those. But if I can claw a little bit of that back by getting a discount that I'm not showing to the customer on other items, that's the decision that I've made for my business. eBay making this opt-in, not opt out, is taking that decision away from me in theory. So I don't like it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Moving on to Etsy. Sellers learn that private posts on Etsy teams have been laid bare. Etsy created teams on the discussion boards where team leaders can make them private or public. They can be either open, closed, or hidden, but it recently introduced a backdoor. I don't know if this was on purpose. I doubt that it was, where posts in supposedly private teams are accessible to non-members. Etsy explained on their help page, Etsy Teams is a community feature where you can gather with peers to socialize, get advice from experienced members, and share information about running a business in your area. A reader told E-commerce Bytes there's a serious breach of privacy going on within the Etsy team space. The changes they made back on March 26 resulted in all teams being visible to all shop owners. Anyone can comment as well, they said. The reader explained the problem. If you go in the front door of Teams, it'll say the team is closed. However, if you open the profile of anyone who's commenting in the forums and look at the comments they've made, you can then enter those private team threads that way. Sellers explained that these posts were meant to be kept private, include discussions about removing members and posts with member contact information. On Saturday, an Etsy moderator posted the following: "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We're working with our platform provider," which indicates to me that they are not actually running their own message boards. This is provided to them by someone outside. "To investigate these reports, please be sure to reach out to us directly if you believe there's a problem with your team settings via community@etsy.com. Etsy teams are only available to logged-in visitors, and team captains can choose between those three settings: open, where all registered community members can join the team and see and create content; closed, access requires approval and only approved members can see the contents; or hidden, the team and its contents are not visible to those without access and will not appear in the directory or search results. These settings are only accessible by registered users with the team captain role. Etsy admin does not use their own team space for their own important discussions," they say, which was probably a clue that these things are not super secure. Again, it's a glitch. It happens, but this is one of those things where a backdoor has been discovered that needs to be closed. If you frequent the Etsy message boards, share your experience in the comments below. Since they're having kind of issues over there, would you let Etsy tweak your titles for SEO? Etsy is testing a feature to optimize sellers' listing titles automatically, while Etsy runs more tests without letting sellers or buyers know. In this case, at least, Etsy invited individual sellers to join a beta test, according to Cindy Baldassi, who published the invitation to sellers, an excerpt of which follows. "We're running an optional test to automatically optimize the listing titles shoppers see on your ads. We'll make tweaks such as adding key search terms that are relevant to your listing or removing typos or redundant details. These tests will run from April through July." This is another message that I have not received personally from Etsy. If you got contacted to participate in this beta, let us know in the comments below if you're doing it and if you've noticed any kind of uptick in your sales because of it. This person is an Etsy expert and consultant. They wrote about the beta test on their Patreon page. She said that while she does not have the option to participate, some sellers who do have shared with her screenshots of the dashboard announcement and other details. They say, as some examples, These will go into titles in search results and in offsite ads. We may add gift for her to the end of your title if it's relevant to the listing. We may remove promotional text or unnecessary adjectives to simplify the title and help it rank higher on offsite channels. So again, this is not something that I would probably participate in. I create my listing titles in the way that I want them to be presented to a potential buyer, and I don't want a platform monkeying about with the choices I've made on how I want my listings to appear. So I would not do this, but some sellers would, and if you are one of them, let me know what your experience has been. This was an interesting one too. On Monday, if you sell on Etsy, this may have happened to you. It sounds like it was pretty widespread. Etsy reverses disbursement deposits for some sellers on tax day on Monday, which is when Etsy processes most, if not all, of their disbursements to sellers. I saw this. I went into my payment account for something totally unrelated, and I saw that a deposit had been reversed. Etsy sellers received disbursements on Monday for sales they had made, but the deposits were quickly reversed unaccountably. The timing, of course, was bad because it was tax day, April 15th. If you didn't file your taxes, tisk tisk, you're late. Compounding the problem was that some Etsy customer service representatives told sellers the problem was due to the seller's bank. Now, I have had that happen where my bank, on one occasion, inadvertently refused a deposit, and it went back to the platform. Again, it's a technical thing. It was a glitch. The money was still there. It was available. I was able to manually request a deposit, and it went through no problem. So those things do happen from time to time. But this appears to have been a problem on Etsy's end. It happened on, this one seller says, both of their shops, doing an online chat with them right now and being told it was a problem with my bank. They need to get their story straight. An Etsy moderator finally responded to reports saying, thanks for your patience as we investigated this issue earlier today. Some of our deposits that were issued to U.S.-based sellers were reversed due to an issue with our payments partner. Remember, they use, again, a third-party processor to transfer money from their bank to your bank. They're not doing that process themselves. They're paying a third party to do that. And it was an issue. This issue is resolved and deposits are on their way to impacted sellers. We apologize for any confusion or inconvenience this may have caused. In my case, the deposit was reversed, and within a fairly short amount of time, the deposit was made again without any problems. The issue, however, comes. Many sellers wrote that they had been impacted and that they had successfully received the second deposit. But yes, one said, we saw the deposit go through. Then I packed more orders for tomorrow. Now I see the first one was returned and there's another one that went through, which is significantly less due to all the labels I created. So what happened is, and this happened to me, so I got a deposit notification for whatever it was. I think it was $137 and some change that it had gone through. I listed some new items, so I had listing fees that would be coming off of my account. The deposit got reversed. When the deposit was sent back through, it only had whatever the new amount was minus my new listing fees, which is fair enough. But if you had done a bunch of listings or bought a bunch of labels, now you are counting on a deposit of whatever amount, $200, and you did $50 worth of labels. Because of this problem, now the deposit that you got was only $150. To be fair, you spent the money. It was going to come out of your account at one point or another anyway, but if you were planning on this money being there on Monday to help you out with taxes and you didn't get everything you were expecting, it can be a problem. So apparently, again, this issue has been fixed. As I record this, it's Sunday. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. Gosh, it's just one thing after another. Here we go. Mercari is lifted selling fees, but beware possible limits. It may be free to sell on Mercari now, but apparently the platform kept in place selling limits. Again, this is not something I've ever experienced. I've been selling on Mercari for years. I've got 8,800 listings over on Mercari. I was never aware. I never bumped into any kind of a listing cap or where I was told I couldn't list any more products. So let me know if you've run into this, but according to some sellers, they're having issues not being able to list. When they went with the no selling fees, this seller began to list more items. Once he reached 100 listings, it blocked him from listing any more items. Mercari's message to the seller says, currently you are limited to 100 listings. This will be increased as you complete more sales. So this is part of their vetting process. They will let you apparently get to 100 listings, and then they want to see a certain level of transactions that are successfully completed. Items are shipped on time, they're the right item, the customer is happy with it, you don't have a lot of cancellations or returns. They want to see some kind of track record of performance history before they will open you up to have additional listings. They reached out to Mercari asking about selling limits, but had not received a response. At that time, there was a discussion on Reddit, apparently back in January, about selling limits. Someone else had been told they exceeded their listing limit and needed to sell more before they could keep listing. This person capped out at 300. So apparently there must be tiers where you need to achieve a certain number of sales to get beyond 100. Then you need to achieve another set of sales to get beyond 300, and so on. Again, for my own part, I've never experienced this issue. I list 20 plus items a day and have 8,800 some items on Mercari, so I've not run into this. I guess we'll see maybe when I get to 10K over there if it's a problem. But yeah, our listing limit, Mercari did finally post. They say increases as sellers complete more sales. Regarding price limits, which is another concern. When you purchase or list on Mercari, there is usually a $2,000 price limit. Given what's going on over at Mercari, I can't imagine anyone buying a $2,000 item over there with the fees, but we're going to talk about that in a second as well. An exception to that is you can list or purchase items verified with Authenticate for up to $5,000, in which case we will ask you to complete an additional identity verification. So if you've run into this, if you're a seller that has decided to up your ante over on Mercari, did you hit a listings cap and were told that you could not list anymore? Oh, finally, a bit of good news. Amazon is making it easier to search products and add offers in bulk. Amazon is making it easier for sellers to search its catalog in bulk and add up to 500 offers with minimal details required, they announced on Thursday. Previously, they say you could only use the Add Products tool to search for a single product using identifiers such as the name, UPC, EAN, ISBN, or ASIN. Now you can search for multiple products at the same time with the following options. You can add products. You can search for up to 20 products and add information such as price and quantity to submit your offers in one go on Seller Central. You can also add products via upload, search for up to 500 products, and generate a pre-filled Excel template. Once you add information such as price and quantity, you can use the spreadsheet to quickly list offers using bulk uploads. If you're a seller on Amazon, this is objectively good news. So congratulations for Amazon adding some additional features. Last thing, this article is also on e-commerce bites. Should eBay, Amazon, and Etsy sellers be running scared from Temu? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't pay any attention to them. I've never seen anything in their ads or from anybody who's ever purchased anything there that leads me to believe I want anything to do with it. But this article asks the question if sellers should be concerned about it. They're the dollar store of online platforms, and it has marketplaces like eBay, Amazon, and Etsy on the run, this article says. That means sellers should also pay attention to the platform because it could have a direct impact on their sales if it hasn't already had a negative impact. Again, I would say from where I'm sitting as a seller of mostly vintage and antique books, and certainly as a seller of used goods, this site doesn't have any effect on me whatsoever. If you are selling new items or clothing or whatnot that is something that they would sell on their site, I can see where they might be a competitive problem, but for my part, this is not a concern for me. Digital Commerce 360 published a video on YouTube in February that cited research that shows how quickly Temu has gained brand awareness. They have spent literally billions of dollars on advertising in the U.S. market. I think they had multiple ads during the Super Bowl, which is, of course, the most expensive ads you can run during the course of the year. They pop up in my feeds in various sites all the time with ads. They are super, super aggressive getting their name out there. It has become the number 4 most visited retail website in the United States behind Amazon, Walmart, and eBay, according to data from Insider Intelligence. Again, as I just said, this article points out they are expected to spend billions on marketing. Is $3 billion in spending going to be enough for them to overtake eBay in 2024? Again, I don't know necessarily that affects a lot of resellers, particularly if you're selling used items. If you're in the new item game, this could be problematic. I'm not going to go through this whole article. I just thought it was interesting that this is coming to bear on sellers. You can let me know in the comments if you're concerned about this at all. That, my friends, is the reselling news. I've got one more thing that I do want to share, but we're going to do that as part of the What Sold segment. So this first item is a sale on Mercari, and it's not anything necessarily spectacular. It's a $19 book with free shipping. So nothing particularly special about this. It was a cool book. It was Memoirs of a Seafaring Life, the narrative of William Spavins. This was one of those Folio Society books that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. Nice hardcover book in a slipcase. Really interesting piece, but not a particularly fantastic sale. $19, free shipping. Cost of goods sold was $2. That's all good. The part that I found really interesting, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. I've highlighted it down below. We've talked about over the last month that Mercari has transferred the fees from sellers to buyers. They've instituted a service fee and a payment processing fee, and they're now charging that to the buyer. And they had said in their initial press release that that service fee could range anywhere from 5% and up. I have seen it as high as 10%. This one, this $19 book had a service fee to the buyer of 19 cents, which is 1%. I don't know if this is a glitch, if it's an error, if it is a test, if it is part of their plan. I've not seen anything from Mercari that indicates that that rate has now gone down to as low as 1%. I'm surprised it is that low on a relatively inexpensive item, collecting a 19-cent fee. I guess if you sell hundreds of thousands of them, maybe you make a few bucks on it. But it seemed really, really odd to me. Let me know in the comments if you've noticed any of this. If you're a seller on Mercari, 19 cent, 1% service fee on this item. Very strange. Very strange. Moving on, sale over on eBay, the National Geographic magazine West Indies compiled, 1920 through 1936. So this was a custom hardcover book that someone had bound where they had essentially gone through all of the National Geographic magazines from 1920 through 1936 and pulled all of the articles from that magazine that referred or talked about the West Indies, and then had them all bound together. So this is literally kind of a one-of-a-kind, very unique piece. It was very difficult to comp. It unfortunately was not in great shape, so even though it was fairly rare, I didn't try to make a killing on it. I had this listed and sold for $23.99 plus shipping. This was part of a bulk buy that I own for less than a nickel. This is also from that same lot, so another cost of goods sold of less than 5 cents. The First Inhabitants of Arizona and the Southwest by Byron Cummings. This was a illustrated hardcover from 1953. I had it listed for $27.99. I received a best offer of $24, and that's what I went ahead and sold this for. Moving over to Etsy, The Treasure Diver's Guide, a revised edition from 1972 by John S. Potter Jr. This was an illustrated hardcover in its dust jacket, had a Mylar Brodart cover on it. This was an ex-library book. Interesting piece, fairly unusual, in reasonably good shape from 1972. This sold for $24.99. Over on Etsy, this was also part of that big 15,000 book lot that I own for less than a nickel. This was one that I picked up at an estate sale about 6 months ago. It was a big collection of German history. This book was The Politics of Illusion, the Fischer Controversy in German I can't even pronounce that, Historiography. This was written by John A. Moses. This was a hardcover book in its dust jacket. It was part of that estate buy I did for $1 each. This sold for $26.99 plus shipping. Cool old piece. The Diccionario Manual y Ilustrado de la Lengua Española, Real Academia Española from 1950. My Spanish is not so bueno. This is a Spanish dictionary with illustrations from 1950. This was part of a lot of books that I owned for about 16 cents. In reasonably good condition, had a little bit of staining on the cover, but a fairly unique piece. This sold on eBay for $27.99 plus shipping. I don't see a lot of foreign language dictionaries. The little like pocket dictionaries that you'll find, I generally, unless they're the old like vintage ones, I pass on those. They don't seem to have a lot of value, but an old like full-size dictionary like this, pretty cool piece, $27.99. Back over to Etsy. This is a book this one has a bit of an interesting story. So this is Short-Term Dynamic Psychotherapy. The editor was Habib Davanloo. This was published in 1980. Hardcover in its dust jacket, published by Jason Aronson. This book I had, it's a wild story. So I got randomly in my mail a return, and I didn't pay that close of attention to the date on the return on the actual package. I just opened it up, saw what it was, said it was from January, and I assumed it was January of this year when I had sent the thing out. I go in to find out where I sold this, and it turns out I sold this on Etsy previously in January of 2023, and this item was just returned to me in March of 2024 as undeliverable. So it took 14 months. It was an overseas order. It was sent to Denmark by international first-class shipping in January of 2023. The buyer never reached out to me to say that they hadn't received it. They didn't request a refund, as far as I'm aware, from Etsy. No record of any of this. The book just randomly showed back up here 14 months later. I reached out to the customer and said, hey, I don't know what's going on. You ordered this book from me over a year ago, and it just showed up on my doorstep. Do you still want it? I'll be happy to try to send it to you again if you'll verify the address for me. I've already arranged with Etsy for them to pay for the reshipping of this, and it was literal crickets. I never have heard from this guy. No refund request, no item not received, nothing. Not anything. Don't want it again, don't care, I don't even know who you are. Literally nothing. So I waited for a few weeks before I relisted this item and then sold it almost immediately for the same price that I'd sold it for previously, $32.99 plus shipping. Etsy actually refunded the shipping cost for me to cover reshipping this to the original customer. So I ended up making out like a bandit on this deal because I essentially have sold it twice. And this, I guess, is going to be the flip of the week. This sold on an offer over on Etsy. I've talked about that before. I don't get a ton of offers on Etsy. The process seems to be working a little better. When they first rolled it out, it was really, really rough. People not clicking the correct links and end up paying full price, and it was just kind of a mess, but it seems to be working quite a bit better now. This was a book I had listed for $99.99 that I received an offer for of $80. Now, Voyager, Olive Higgins Prouty from 1941. It's a Houghton Mifflin first edition hardcover. Really nice book in really good condition. Very, very difficult to find. This sold again on an offer over on Etsy for $80. This was part of a big lot of books that I own again for less than a nickel. So a very profitable week. I sold a bunch of books out of that lot. I'm hopeful that the last two big bulk buys that I did will start to generate some nice sales as well. Again, the one from the estate, those books were 50 cents a piece, and the one I did this past weekend for the 167, they were about 90 cents a piece. So I've got some pretty decent stuff that'll be in the pipeline. If you're inclined to be interested in purchasing books, if you're not following my eBay store, you should go do that because there's a lot of stuff to come. That, my friends, is going to put a wrap on a really, really lengthy episode for this week. I hope, again, that you got something out of it. And if you did, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not currently a subscriber to the channel or a follower of the podcast, please consider doing that. And, of course, share this with any of your like-minded reselling friends. Also, go check out the show I did with Katie last week. Again, it was a pleasure and an honor to be on her show. We had a really great discussion. The link to that will be in the show notes and the video description down below as well. So go check that out. As always, thank you so much for spending a not insignificant amount of your time with me today. And now it's time to sell. Thanks, guys.
You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.